Welcome, everyone, to our SFA Spotlight Talk with Richard H. Alpert in conversation with Jude Mooney today. My name is Maria Teresa Barbist. I'm one of the co-founders of SFAA, and it's always the Spotlight Talks is always like one of my favorite moments with this work for SFAA because it's always exciting to hear more about the process and the background of the artworks that we see in the exhibitions and that we share. And so today I have the honor to introduce Jude Mooney. Jude Mooney is an alum of SFAI, and she also curated the exhibition Unruly at the Museum of Sonoma County. Jude is part of our liaison team for Sonoma. And so this is kind of like also how this whole project started. And it's been such a wonderful ride. And I'm really excited for you to be moderating this talk with Richard Alpert today, who is part of the show. So I'll hand it over to you. Take it away, Jude.
Thank you, Maria. Hello, everyone. I want to introduce Richard Alpert, Richard H. Alpert. He is a sculptor, an abstract filmmaker, and a performance artist. His journey began in New York City in 1947. With a career spanning several decades, he has received numerous accolades, including the National Endowment for the Arts Artist Fellowship Grant in 1979 and 80. His work has been exhibited across the United States, Europe, and Japan at iconic venues such as the Petzel Gallery in New York City and the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art and the American Center in Paris, among others. At the core of Alpert's artistic practice lies a spirit of playful curiosity combined with deep fascination for understanding the physical world. He likens his creative process to taking apart the clock to see what makes it tick, a metaphor highlighting his commitment to discovery and analysis. By drawing connections to scientific concepts, Alpert organizes his visual materials in a methodical and in improvisational ways, often incorporating chance occurrences that transform into compelling details or even the main focus of his artwork. Working across various formats, including performance, video installation, painting, drawing, photography, and sculpture, Alpert integrates minimalist and formalist approaches. His art frequently features gradations of color, repeated patterns, geometric structures, and modulated sound, inviting viewers into a rich sensory and conceptual experience. Alpert's art serves as a narrative, a chronicle of his process and the journey of bringing an idea to life. It invites exploration not only of the final work, but also of the intricate story behind its creation. Through his multifaceted practice, he offers a glimpse into the beauty of investigation, experimentation, and transformation. So I'm going to begin to share my screen, and Richard is going to...
So thank you, Jude. That was a wonderful introduction. And good morning to everybody. Hope everybody's doing well on this Monday morning. 10 o'clock out in California, wherever else you are, it's your own time. So today I'm going to share with you some of my work. And the presentation is taken from my website. And these are highlights from the website. And I'll be showing you some slides and giving you some background information.
Can everybody see the website on your end?
Yeah, everything looks great. Thank you.
Perfect.
All right. So Jude has already queued up from the sculpture gallery a work that I call Range. And so to start off, I'll introduce this sculpture. So what you're looking at are objects made by using microcrystalline wax. It's a common material used to for mold making for casting bronze sculpture. So this was a material which was affordable, set up fast, and could be used as a glue for building small objects. characteristics of this wax. It could be heated over and over without its properties deteriorating, and had a really deep and beautiful amber color. Also, like the surfaces could be worked on over and over. I could create shapes by troweling surfaces with a hot knife, which felt very satisfying. It was like applying frosting to a cake. So it was fun. I could melt shapes down and build them back up quickly. I could dip things like matchsticks, cotton thread, tissue paper, sponge into a hot pot of molten wax that I kept in my studio and get some very interesting visual results. Range had these elements, and the wax allowed for a wide variety of visual appearances, as you will see. For example, when the wax was applied thinly, it created a wonderful translucency. And when it was applied very thinly, it was transparent. Conversely, when it was applied thickly, it gave very dense and opaque visual appearance to an object. The troweled surfaces I could buff with a cloth and they came up shiny, or I could leave them with a matte sheen. So on some of these, you can see the match sticks. These are all small. And there are 7 tables in this. And they were done over a period of 3 years. So here's something that's sort of central to that Jude mentioned in her introduction that I'd like to mention again, is that the act of playing with materials in order to discover something about their nature and possible connection to making art is an approach I used for this piece and also continue to use in a lot of my work. So you can see the string, you can see the transparency or translucency. You can see the membrane, which is just tissue paper dipped in this microcrystalline wax. So after I accumulated a lot of these objects, I started thinking of them not as individual objects, but as part of a vocabulary that I was developing, sort of a dictionary of shapes and forms. And then I thought of it as either a narrative that was evolving and showed a progression of these shapes. There are a lot of elements that repeat in parts of other small objects. And that to me is like a language. I haven't looked at these in a long time, and it's wonderful to see them. So Jude, let's go back to sculpture gallery and go to a subcategory of a sculpture or series called primary traces. And this is a series of sculptures constructed out of steel wire and synthetic rubber primarily. And within this group, I'm exploring, I feel, the boundary between formal art and playful experimentation. The synthetic rubber has a restrictive palette. So I was using primary colors, which was great because it allowed me to work on the shapes and the forms of the sculpture more than the color, but I wanted color in these because it gave it a sort of a toy-like feel to it, which sort of traced back to a frame of mind that I had as a kid. And that frame of mind was nurtured by imagination, curiosity, wonder. And that was this attempt to get back to that. So here we're going backwards in time. So we're going from the first images that you saw, which are the most recent, going back to previous time when I was making things that maybe looked a little bit more toy-like. There are about 100 sculptures in this series. I remember an instructor at San Francisco Art Institute telling me that make 100 of something and you'll know something.
Richard,
Yes.
many of these are dipped. Can you tell us about the dipping process?
So I took this wire, some of it was actually screening, and I could cut it up in certain ways. And then I would make a trough, and I was able to actually lower the wire into the trough, which was filled with the synthetic rubber, and then lift it out. And I could continue to do that and build up the surface. I really like some of the multiple dips because it created these nodules at the end of the wires, and I just thought that was sort of fascinating. You'll see them in that sculpture up now, and this one also. So for this next sculpture, I'm going to have Jude cue up a video gallery because this will give you an idea with a sculpture called Glad Sad of what the movement was in this sculpture. So now we come to a puzzle. At first glance, this seems to be amusing and absurd. However, there's something more interesting going on in this glad, sad sculpture. I think it delves into an interest that I have in the significance, there we go, and the significance of the number 3. It's profoundly connected to creativity, optimism, and curiosity. Number 3 resonates with concepts such as past, present, future, the concept of a complete cycle, a beginning, middle, and end, and most importantly to me, birth, life, and death. The 3 tennis balls, which have been colored with primary colors, inside the plastic tube gives the piece a humorous and absurd undertone to a view of this life cycle. The sudden inflation and slow deflation of the rubber gloves, I think, serve as sort of quotation marks for both the sudden entrance into the world, into the physical world, and the ultimate effects of aging on our physical being. All things, living things, succumb to this passage of time. So we're going to stay in the video gallery. And Jude, if you'll go to mechanism for twisting wire, we're going to play this. So my next sculpture is quite different. This is going to show you sort of how I did it. It's called Mechanism for Twisting Wire. And this work removes the materials from their utilitarian context and challenges the notion of functionality and questioning the interplay between art and utility. In part, I think that this piece, the sculpture, was inspired by the absurdism of the Dadaists. Central to the essence of the sculpture is the realization it doesn't have any inherent function without human enablement. So here's a setup. So the first stringing of these wires creates a cylinder marked by lines of the wire between the 2 plates. But what you're seeing is not the actual finished sculpture. You're just seeing how I got to the finished product. that's the finished product. That's the finished sculpture. Okay, Jude, if you go back to the beginning, the main galleries, and go to the painting gallery and down to, yep, you got it. This is from 1974, and this is one of my earliest works, and I really enjoyed making it. These rectangles are the result of working with graphite and cellophane adhesive tape. This piece has many of the characteristics of my later work, such as a degree of formalism, gradation, as Jude mentioned, and sequence. And Jude, if we can go to the next slide to the right. And the next slide to the left below. And the final slide, and then back to the first one. So you can see the pieces of tape. So what was I doing here? I was transferring a rectangle which had a very heavy coating of graphite. And I was transferring it next to that by pulling off that surface. And I used these pieces of cellophane adhesive tape to do that. So here's a gradation. This is something I'm attracted to. And the final product is somewhat looks like the very first rectangle to the left, but has tape over it. The rectangle all the way to the left is just bare paper. And I stopped transferring these rectangles when I got pretty close to tearing through the paper. And they ended up with something I thought was very interesting. And I also think I'm attracted to artwork that's clever. There's something about clever which I think is captivating and attractive. So I thought of this piece in that manner. I'll give myself credit. I think it was clever. Okay, let's go, Jude, to the next painting in the painting gallery and underneath the subcategory of array. And we're going to go to plane array. That's right there. So here you see demonstrated many of the characteristics I just mentioned in tape pull-off. You may not recognize the origin of this painting easily. It's composed of flattened takeout food containers that you might have seen in the 70s, and think Chinese food. And I did this by shaking and moving around in different chunks of oil paint in the folded boxes with ball bearings. And this was done in the individual containers. And you'll see those containers in a slide that's going to come up. And once I had painted by shaking all these boxes with the oil paint and ball bearings, I flattened them and glued them to a stretched canvas. Now, this was really a repetitive and laborious task to make this, but the end product was definitely worth staying with. I just think it's a fascinating thing to see all the different patterns as your eye moves over the surface. queuing in on one section and then having that explode where you start to see it in other parts of the painting. So maybe nowadays a computer might be able to simulate such a painting. However, I think the intricate nature and the subtlety, which Jude, if you can proceed with going from one slide to the next in array, and in that plane array. Okay, if you can go to the next slide below that to the left. And so we're going to start to get closer, and you can start to see the container that's been flattened. And if you could hold on that, I'll hold on that one. You can see the arbitrary and chance surfaces that are made by these ball bearings banging around with the oil paint. And let's go for one more slide. And so here are the food takeout containers. And these are ready, these already have a couple of colors in them. And if we go to the next slide below it, to the left. And you can see on the top right, these containers unfolded, and in this case, they're drying. So I had to dry each color between refolding it slightly different, in a slightly different manner, and putting in a different color of oil paint and ball bearings. And so I proceeded to do that until I had coated all the surfaces of the interior of these food containers. And then as I said, I glued them to a canvas. Okay, Jude, if you can go back up to the main gallery and go to performances. And scroll down until we get to hand-generated light. And we're going to hold on the second slide. Okay, so this is a piece I did at the Museum of Conceptual Art. And forget what date. Could you go up a little bit? I forget what date that was. If you could, yeah, a little bit higher, a little bit lower, I mean, 75. Okay, so let's go back and frame that light bulb and door panel. So in the Jewish religion, there is a light above the ark where the Torah scroll is kept. It's called Ner Talmid in Hebrew. And the light is supposed to be an everlasting light or an eternal flame. It's intended to never go out and can be thought of as symbolizing a relationship between God and fire or light. As I placed the small light bulb on the outside of the door panel, I remember and thought about this image of the light above the ark, above the Torah. So I generated electricity with a hand crank generator that I had found in a Army Navy surplus store on Market Street when they had them, those stores. So I generated the electricity with a hand crank generator from the inside of the room behind the door. I thought of this light as a reaffirmation of the life force. The light of life exists for a brief moment in time. And Jude, if we can now go back to the main galleries and go to installations. And we're going to cue on Ricochet. So this next work is related to the process I use to create paintings with chunks of oil paint and steel ball bearings, as in the previous painting gallery I showed you for a piece called Ricochet. I'm sorry, for a piece called Plane Array. And this piece from 1978 was called Ricochet. This is how I did it on a larger scale. And this box is freestanding inside a gallery, 6 feet wide, 10 feet high, and 24 feet deep. My inspiration came from the energy observed in particle physics, as well as playing racquetball in a pristine and white box-like court. So there's the painting, sort of the accumulation of all the colors. And if we go to the next slide to the right, there's a little detail, and actually the one below it is also a detail to the left. And these are all marks that have been made by the ball being hit on the different surfaces of this large box that I made. So some of the balls rolled out, still having ink on them that was done with the printing ink. And some of them skipped off the surface as they approached that back wall. And we can go to the right. And you can see me. And I'm holding a container that I made. And inside that container are the chunks of oil paint and ball bearings. So what you can't see is that there's a lid on the other side of that shape, that box, that elongated shape, that encloses that and allows me to shake it around without the ball bearings and the oil paint just leaking out. And then if you go to the next slide lower. Okay, these are the colors that I use to make Ricochet. And I took printing ink and then I added extender to it. And this is just a list of the different colors that I used. And if we go to the right, you'll see the little diagram that I made in order to make this box.
Richard, can I ask you here about your skills as a craftsman and a builder? After school, you became a contractor, or?
I always, first of all, I always like to take things apart, see how they work. And the story behind that from my parents is that when I was 2 years old in a crib, they heard a giant bang and they came up to the room that I was in and I had taken apart my crib. So I like to take things apart, but at this point in my life, and I put them back together usually. I picked up the skill of carpentry and general contracting. I did a lot of that in San Francisco. And that gave me the skill to build something like this. And I do think a lot of my work is built. I build the paintings. Of course, I build the sculptures. Okay, we can go, Jude, to the photography gallery. And go to transbate columns. Okay, so I lived in San Francisco for about 40 years, and I rode my bike a lot in the city. So I got to see a lot of the dramatic transformations of the city and explore little areas that weren't in view of general public. Now, one of these transformations I was lucky enough to stumble upon in 2011. These are a series of 20 photographs that I took of the tops of column bases at the construction site of the new Transbay Transit Center. I could, that wasn't from the top, but you could see the remnants of an I-beam cased inside a concrete, inside a steel sleeve. So, like I said, I took the tops of these column bases at the construction site of the new Transbay Transit Center in San Francisco. The old one was being demolished at that time, and the Transbay Terminal was really originally built in 1939, I think. So this image is a result of inadvertently a welder cutting off the steel I-beams at these that were embedded in the basin that held up a roadway. And I say inadvertently because they were just doing a job. But when I came upon it, I thought, wow, these are just beautiful paintings. So I photographed them from top down. My truck had a lumber rack on it, so I could strap down a ladder and get way out over where these steel cutoffs were, steel posts, and photograph them like an aerial view. So I thought of the image. It was a result of a welder cutting off steel, the I-beam that was embedded in the base, and I found this result to be both brutal and beautiful. So Jude, if we can go back to the video gallery and go down to the video called Dutch Walk, or go up to it. And we can play some of that, and I'll talk over it. So I was in Amsterdam in 2018, walking around the city, when I accidentally came upon a small freighter navigating on an inland waterway. I was struck by the simplicity and elegance of the mechanics of the traditional Dutch walk.
Richard? Can you speak louder?
Oh, okay. So while overtly this sequence of filmed images is just a freighter going, entering a lock and being lifted from a lower level to a higher level of water. For me, it was a metaphor for a sexual act. The title Dutch Lock has a double meaning. One is literal, and the other is the name of a sexual position. So, Jude, I think we got the idea, and we could end the presentation.
Richard,
Yes.
over the last video, the sound from the video was a little loud, so we couldn't
Okay.
hear what you were speaking so well. Do you want to say, maybe repeat a couple of sentences of what you said over the video?
Sure. So I was in Amsterdam in 2018, walking around the city, when I accidentally came upon a small freighter navigating on an inland waterway. So I sort of stumbled upon this. And I was struck by the simplicity and the elegance of the mechanics of the traditional Dutch lock. So while overtly this sequence of filmed images is just a freighter entering a lock and being lifted from a lower level to a higher level of water, for me, it was a metaphor for a sexual act. The title Dutch lock has a double meaning. One is literal, and the other is a name of a sexual position.
Thank you, Richard.
Mm-hmm.
And this was the end of the presentation, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and
Okay,
I just want to say, hey, folks, thank you for your time and attention. And again, Jude, for your help and encouragement. I look forward to other artist spotlight presentations and hope to see you all at other SFAA events.
we got a couple of questions. If you give us a couple more minutes, Richard, from the audience. Katie Moskowitz, Knightsby was the first one. And we kind of need to go back a little bit in your imagery, because this was when you showed the video of how you actually created mechanism of twisted wire.
Okay.
So the question was, is that a performance?
Well, I don't think so. I think it's just an object. However, I think it's excuse me. I think it's nice to know how I got there, so I made the video of it. But the actual piece is an object. The video is an accompaniment of it. However, I have performed it for the public.
Thank you. And I unmuted Katie because she had another question that, Katie, if you just want to ask yourself.
Oh, okay. Well, I probably know you. I went to the Art Institute and lived in the city for 17 years. My dad was Mo Moskowitz of Mo's books. I rode my bike all the time. I don't know that I never met you, but I may have. I did have a question regarding the explosion in your workplace and how the death affected you. You said I read about it online. It said 9 people died. And by the way, your work is beautiful and very carefully. I see a lot of visual sensitivity in your work, which is amazing. But seeing as you seem to be sensitive, how did that affect you I didn't want to be indiscreet to ask that in a way that would be
No,
hard.
that's okay. Well, I was elated to get out of that building when it collapsed down around me. So that was such a lucky thing to happen. I don't know how to attribute it to anything more than luck, because I was in my studio. I was on the third floor. There were some people on the very basement floor that had been making fireworks, and they modified a machine to make fireworks. They had the store that they had made was a front for making the fireworks. It was a computer paper store. So they modified it, they screwed up, and they blew up the whole building. And while I was in it, I was making a sculpture of some sort. Forget exactly what it was. But then the entire place went black, dark. And of course, I thought at that time, holy shit, it's an earthquake, and I'm going to die here. And I could feel the floor that I was on pancake down onto the floor below it, and that pancake down onto the basement floor. And I heard some people yelling because they got caught in the debris that came down. But, like I say, luckily, I had these giant beams in this studio, and they didn't fall on my head. I was right underneath one. A skylight had twisted and cracked open, so as the roof had collapsed, so I was able to sort of reach up to the skylight and get out to what was left, the remnants of the roof, and tried to help a friend out who had a studio there, who was hurt pretty badly. I wasn't hurt too badly. I mean, I had some cuts and bruises on my legs because one side of my studio had a lot of windows in it. So all like glass just flew across the studio. So I helped them out, and then I got out to the street and just watched the whole thing burn down. It was a giant old wood building. So the immediate effect was I was elated that I was still alive. And I don't know if, and the idea that I, lost all my sculpture, or most of it, was very depressing. But I was alive, so I could continue with making art and just living. That was a wonderful thing. I was lucky.
Thanks, Richard.
Sure.
We had one more comment, and then if anyone else has maybe one more question, write it in the chat. We have Whitney Fuller here with us today, and she was writing, I love the array painting results, and applause. If you want to talk a little bit more about the array paintings were where you were painting the Chinese food. What are they called? Containers, right? Yeah. How did you get the idea to paint the food containers?
Well, let's see. It came from making boxes that were not food containers, that I used oil paint in to shake around. And food takeout containers were just inexpensive and easy to get to. And I just was fascinated by the fact that you could take a flat piece of paper and make it watertight. I thought that was really interesting. And I was fascinated with other aspects of differently folded boxes. Anyway, so I came to that, and I thought that would be an interesting thing to use. At the same time, I read an article by Douglas Hofstadter He's a cognitive scientist. It was in Scientific American. And he talked about eye movement, and he used the word tessellation, but more commonly it's tiling. And you see that in a lot of Middle Eastern religious sanctuaries. So anyway, I thought, go ahead and make a lot of these and see what happens if you glue them to a canvas. I had done 2 before that, just sort of as an experimentation to see what it would be like. And I thought, well, okay, this is going to be great on a larger scale because it's going to employ that eye movement across a field where you pick up different patterns. And I was fascinated by that. So.
Thanks, Richard. We have one more question that just came in. Oh, a couple of questions. Rose and Raphael, perhaps I missed this, but for the construction with the large, long box with colored ball bearings making impressions mostly at the end, how was the paint ball bearings applied?
Okay, is that the freestanding box you're talking
Yes.
about, the large scale one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so when I was going to school at the University of Pittsburgh in the 60s, I had taken a course in printmaking. And so I knew about ink and brayers. And of course, I think I mentioned that I was playing racquetball. So I made a paddle out of wood, and then I could ink up the paddle. And by playing with the ball, I would impart ink to the ball, and it would hit the different surfaces. It would skip off the surfaces. If it had a lot of ink on it, it would roll back and make lines on the floor. So I don't know if that answers the question or not, but.
Absolutely. And Ricochet is the name of the piece, right?
Ricochet is the name of it, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And Caroline Savage also talks about a Ricochet. I remember Ricochet and your penny project on the sidewalk by the Mint. As my grad advisor, you inspired me to make a film called Light Following. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And
I think you were the only person there to witness that performance. So thank you. But I was interested also in pennies because they had almost completely lost their value. So I started out at the old Mint and stamped pennies every foot until I got to the new Mint. And I stamped them with a hammer that I had made with a certain face in it, a certain pattern. And I just thought that that was an interesting sort of route to take, mint to mint, old to new. I also really liked the idea that it was a sculpture that cleaned up after itself, because folks followed me as I was proceeding on the sidewalk, and they picked up the pennies. So I thought that was a nice adjunct to that sculpture.
And then I'm going to read the last comment and then hand it back to you, Jude,
Okay.
for the closing. This is a comment from Whitney Fuller again. The surgical gloves with the subject of birth, life, and death really inspires the thought of someone assisting with birth in hospital. Speaking of the glad and sad sculpture. Yeah, that's a nice observation. It's also like, the surgical gloves is like in hospitals in general, right?
Yes. Thank you, Whitney.
Mm-hmm. All right, Jude, if you would like to close it out with Richard.
Sure. Just want to say thank you, Richard. I know it's a lot of work to put these presentations together, and we really appreciate your time and your work. And it's very inspiring to learn about how you think, how you make art, what motivates you. And I'm so, so happy that you lived through that fire, through the collapse of the building.
Yeah.
It kind of means you're meant to be here to give us your work. And what a blessing. And just want to say thank you for participating in the Unruly show, which is up at the Museum of Sonoma County through June 8th. And I'm giving my last curatorial tour on Saturday, May 31st. Some of the artists will be there. It starts at 2 p.m. and it's free for SFAI alumni. Is there anything else, Maria? Any other announcements that you want to make again?
That's it for now. I'm gonna stop the recording so everyone can say hi to Richard without being recorded, if that's okay, Richard.
Absolutely.